It's an open question. What are you all seeing within the Black community being disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic? And why do you believe our community has a history of health disparities? And what are some of the things that we can be doing as physicians and practitioners to kind of close that gap?
Well, I guess I'll start. And I can speak from a population and also personal perspective. I think from a population perspective, what we tend to attribute a lot of the disparities to has to do with kind of the circumstance that a lot of times we find ourselves in disproportionate manner, and so that includes things like being under financial stress, lower levels of employment, or being underemployed. Living in more urban environments where healthcare tends to be a little bit more difficult to access, having problems with transportation. These things kind of all add up to what we call social determinants of health. And we have a disproportionate burden of social determinants of health that also kind of affects the healthcare that we get, from a population perspective. From a personal perspective, I think I'm going to guess that the attendees and other panelists have had friends, family members, multiple folks that we know come down with COVID. We may have even experienced a loss or death of people that we love very much, which I think kind of shows that this is very close and personal to us. I mean, we're dealing with kind of the trauma of being disproportionately affected by this pandemic, but also then not really being able to grieve in the normal fashion that we would. We can't get together with friends and family in the same way. We can't have that repast that we usually would all get together at and have the good soul food and talk about, the good times and celebrate the life of the people that we lost. And so, it's been very difficult for us, from a population standpoint to deal with the pandemic as it's caused us to kind of have to pull back and stay away from people and use our usual resources.
Dr. Ball, when we're talking about social determinants, we're looking at housing, education, access to healthcare, et cetera. So, Dr. Ball, can you kind of let us know, maybe from the perspective of working with some of your clients, how maybe some of these social determinants are having an impact on levels of stress and anxiety that they're exhibiting or even communicating with you?
Well, one of the things that I've noticed is that my patients, they have been afforded more time to concentrate on themselves. I've noticed an uptick in new patients, with lockdowns or, even reduced work hours. Folks are trying to focus more on themselves, and they're using this time as an opportunity to come out and work through some of their longstanding issues. I've also noticed that with some of the insurance plans, they have been very instrumental in facilitating folks coming out for care by waiving copays, which has been absolutely wonderful. So individuals who ordinarily could not afford, the $40 or the $30 per session fees, now they don't have to worry about that. And for example, one of the insurance companies, Aetna, they just extended their waiving of copays through September 30th. So, with all of the variables that our community has to deal with, there, is a bright side that, the larger community is aware of, and I think trying to help or do their part so that folks can come out and get the help that they need.
Thank you. I think that's something that's very important. A major barrier to getting the services that our community needs is insurance. And we talk about how insurance is tied to our jobs, and those that have access, you really can experience some positive health outcomes. But those that do not have that option, it can really kind of start to weigh in on us. And even as we were thinking about where we are in this whole pandemic and this quarantine. We're like in month 4 right now, going into July. So originally at first, it was very difficult for me shifting, from just a interpersonal environment to now we're being restricted to our homes and everything being in a virtual space. And I know that for a lot of people that caused some major shifts within their homes and within the family dynamic. So Dr. Tartt, maybe you can kind of give us a little bit of insight on how that's affected couples, right? Relationships within the home, the parent-child dynamic. We really have taken the outside world and put that into our personal space, not personal space like our docile environment. So kind of give us an insight on how couples have been dealing with this time and some of the things that you've been able to see as well.
This has been a challenge on couples and families. I'm just going to be honest with you, because the degree of difficulty has ratcheted up tenfold. So here's the reality for most couples. So you may have one or both parties working at home with kids, and then you're having to teach them curriculum because this online school happens and teachers didn't know, they weren't prepared for it. So you become the teacher. So I have a 14-year-old and a 4-year-old, and it was very difficult to be able to teach a middle schooler. I don't know what she's learning. I thought I was smart. I know algebra. I don't know how to teach it. But how you don't know it? How you don't know it? That's as far as I got. So I had to teach her while trying to entertain a 4-year-old. All right, with her preschool work, whatever that is, okay, that they're sending, okay, and being able to do what I'm supposed to do and try to work with my wife because we're in business together. As I'm in, the degree of difficulty is difficult. So there are a lot of couples. I know a lot of families that are co-signing on that. So one, it required a lot of couples to be more structured. Like we have to have a setting. One of the biggest adjustments I made was I now come to the office. I couldn't see clients at home because then it looked like to my kids, I'm actively rejecting them for 8 to 10 hours a day when my clients need me the most right now. So I'm usually here. And so that puts the responsibility on my wife for both of our daughters. That's a lot. I'm glad I'm here though. I'm not, this is the easier job. All right, so that's one thing. And then 2, for couples, if couples were struggling before I don't like calling it lockdown, that makes me think about jail, but sheltering in, it put pressure on them. It put pressure because there were a lot of couples that they were good because they didn't spend that much time together. I'm just being honest. You go to the gym, you were traveling, you had time with your friends, and then if you come home and now you actually have to spend time together and coordinate what's going on with the kids and run a business. And let's not to mention, there are a lot of people who experience an uptick in work stress. Either they were laid off, furlough, or they were the ones having to lay off others. Or if you're an entrepreneur, figure out how you're going to make this shift if you had a brick and mortar business or even an online. So you're trying to figure out all these things so your stress is high. And so to be on the same page with your spouse has to be coordinated. Because what I've seen is a lot of spouses, say the spouse owns a business, they're trying to figure out how to get the money right. And so they're up, they're in the bedroom with the laptop on, and the other spouse is like, I've been with these kids all day, you on a laptop? And then he or she is turning, but do you understand we still have bills? Dr. Carr, says, private school is not stopping. Credit card's not stopping. Mortgage is not stopping. I mean, they'll pause it for 3 months and then that 3 months is due. They're not going to tack it on the end unless you have a friend in the banking industry, unless you know Otis. They're not tacking it on. So what I'm saying is that is a lot of external stress. And so what couples and families have to do is reset, talk about how do we reorganize? How do we actually have family meetings? How do we structure this? What do we do financially? What do we do to make sure that our quality time works? And how do we make sure that we manage our kids? Because kids are not meant to be sheltered in for 4 months. So I saw all of those dynamics in addition to a spike in kids who just lost structure and sleep till 11, 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Because what's the point of getting up? All right, to do absolutely nothing. And y'all know that have kids. When we go to sleep is when they're all on Instagram, TikTok, it's unsupervised. And that's when their social time is. So all those things are working against us. And so it's requiring families and married couples to do marriage and family differently.
Yeah, we really kind of just seen a little bit of a breakdown of the framework, right, of how the system of the family works. And I was reading through psychology today, and they noted a rise in intimate partner violence, right, just with having some unhealthy, toxic relationships that are kind of bound within the home setting. So this is an open question to the entire panel. What are some of the dangers of staying in unhealthy relationships or living situations during this quarantine time?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to kind of consider, safety. I think that what we are seeing is that, if part of the coping mechanism for the couple or for the family was for, folks to separate or go do some activities outside the home in order to blow off steam, that's no longer an option. And so I think it forced folks together to kind of confront problems, either constructively or not. And so, those folks that are good at working constructively, maybe in couples therapy and working it through with a third party, they have some tools in their toolbox to use in order to better get along and get through some of the stress and struggle. Whereas, other couples may not be using that. They may be kind of relying on some of the, kind of same maladaptive coping skills that they have always had. Folks, we've also seen kind of an uptick in use of substances to cope with stress. So people drinking more, smoking more, using drugs more, which is kind of a recipe for, an unsafe situation in the home. And so, kind of figuring out how to, rely on some more adaptive coping mechanisms, be it with a third party or kind of, your own kind of self-help in getting away from those maladaptive coping strategies like drinking more, smoking more, is really going to kind of help couples that are struggling right now. But we've certainly seen that uptick, and first and foremost, the consideration is safety of the individuals in that home.
And one of the things that I found was that, just kind of putting it out there, at the very beginning that, look, guys, look at what's going on around us. You have your kids there all day. You're trying to get work done. Tensions are going to be higher. Whatever was going on before is now further exacerbated. And, you may be more irritated with one another. And so I think just kind of giving people the permission to feel and experience the tension that they were, going through and were even expecting was helpful. And once that was kind of like on the table, it was a little bit easier for people to take in, the coping strategies that they had learned, and a little bit easier for them to, put them into play when they needed to put them into play.
Yeah, and what this did was this made marital satisfaction an absolute necessity. So like the quality, so we ask couples, on a scale of 0 to 1,000, how happy are you in this marriage? All right. And so what's happening is that's being exposed. And so couples were buffered by their hobbies and by their friends and by their jobs. And so I could go to work and be cool. I could go to the gym and be cool. I could meet with my friends and be cool. I could go to sports games and be cool. All that got taken away at the same time, which means that all those needs now have to be met by your spouse. All right. And if your marital satisfaction was low before, and that now your spouse has to be able to meet your recreational needs, you all have to be on the same page about business, while business is changing, and we have to coordinate the kids, and we have to be on top of each other, and just too much time together. If we didn't have great conversation and communication before, all that did was get escalated. So like if you squeeze toothpaste, what comes out? What's on the inside? When you squeeze a relationship, what's on the inside came out. So that's one thing. So couples have found themselves, a lot of them are separated, a lot of them sleep in separate bedrooms, a lot of them this really stressed their marriage because the marriage satisfaction wasn't there in the first place, and now it's caused us to ratchet up. And then number two, this is just real facts. One of the reasons that people don't leave toxic relationships is because they can't afford to. They can't afford to. So I don't want to downgrade lifestyle. I'm 61. I don't want to leave right before I get his or her pension. All right. I don't want to split my pension. Y'all want me to be real? So I'm with you, and I'm sheltered in, and we were getting by because we had an agreement that you would stay out the house, you would do your thing, and we would coordinate on the kids. But now that we actually have to relate like a married couple 8 to 10 hours a day, when we're not connected like that, that is what has really, I think, intensified part of the reason partner violence has increased, because the stress has increased. The stress has increased, and so those arguments are recycling. And then, so how many times do I have to tell you that we need to do chores differently? How many times do I have to tell you we need to do the finances differently? How many times I need to tell you that I would like to make love, or let's go on a date, or how are we gonna go do a date during COVID-19? These other couples in the parking lot. And so whatever's happening, it's causing those couples to really look at their alternatives and to be upset that they can't go anywhere, and to be able to try to make it work.
Here we go. We have another pandemic, this whole racial pandemic, right? Things that have been going on over the last month or two. And for our community, it's not that it's just happened, it's just things have been accelerated and exacerbated over this time. And so, being a young Black man that's grown up in the South, I'm very well adept with a lot of these different things that have happened, the history, the tone, everything. But, our people, we're dealing with two things that are very, very thick from each end. So how difficult has it been? Maybe Dr. Parsons or Dr. Ball, from your perspective, how difficult has it been for our community to deal with both this pandemic, this quarantine being restricted, and then also having 24/7 racial violence kind of being perpetuated on our community?
Well, I'll say first, I think, when one of the things that I think we tend to forget with kind of the social media cycle and the 24-hour news cycle is that when it comes down to it, us Black folks, and people in general are generally resilient under stress. And so, when we come onto hard times, particularly hard times that are heaped upon us, most people actually cope fairly well and get through it, and they come out on the other side stronger for it. That being said, that certainly is not everybody. A lot of folks have a lot of difficulty kind of coping with, the usual stress, and then you throw something else on top of that. Becomes very difficult to cope and get through it. And so, there are ways to take care of yourself to help kind of reduce some of the exposure to kind of bite-sized pieces that you can digest, And so, if it is that the repeated videos and news stories and clips of Black folks getting, abused and shot and killed, if it becomes a traumatic stressor, learn how to pull back from that, take it in bite-sized chunks. Like I personally, I stopped watching the videos, I've in my life, I've seen enough of them, and I've had a couple of experiences myself to where I don't feel the need to watch every video that comes out, even though you kind of still feel that impulse to click play, because there is that baseline interest to kind of see what happened. But in order for me, take care of my own mental health, it's really, I know that I don't need to watch that again. I got 3 kids, 16-year-old son who's, 6'1", and so I don't want to see people that look like my son getting abused by the police. And so I've cut out the videos. I can still be an advocate. I can, donate money to causes that I believe in. I can go to marches and hold my sign and take the kids and teach them how to protest, and kind of funnel that energy into constructive activities that really help me feel like I'm making a difference without continually exposing myself to that personal trauma.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Parsons. Go ahead, Dr. Ball.
One of the things that I'm seeing is, whereas in the past folks could, do a better job of shielding themselves from what has been going on or what's going on around them, it's becoming more and more difficult to do that. I live and work in Southwest Fulton County, and some of my newest patients, they've actually witnessed, things happen in front of them. One patient, in particular, he had called me maybe 2 weeks ago to set up an appointment. And, his, first words were something to the effect of, I'm a Black man and I'm afraid and I have X amount of Black sons. And so we scheduled his appointment. The next week, we start a session, and he explains to me what he did that Saturday night. And as he's explaining what happened, he's like, yeah, and so I went to Wendy's and I was wondering why the line was so long. And I'm like, oh my God, did you witness Mr. Brooks get murdered? And yes, he did. So it's like, not only are folks seeing these things, in front of, their eyes, yeah, they're seeing stuff on, their social media feed. And some of the things that, they may ordinarily not click on, they are tempted to do so because folks around them are talking about it. And they don't want to necessarily be left out of the conversation, or they're concerned about the moves and changes that we're seeing across our society losing momentum. So they're kind of trying to feed into what they're experiencing so that they can stay, stay abreast and stay involved. I'm noticing that with all of the exposures, people are really at a breaking point. I've had folks come in and, they're talking about how anxious they are, how depressed they are, how they're having, stress, at work, on top of the fact that they're working from home now. And with furloughs going on, they have to deal with more work and less personnel. So that's really stressful. So, one of the things that I found to be helpful is to explain to folks that, all of that anxiety, that fear, that depression, those are all normal reactions to abnormal situations. We, unfortunately, as a community, have dealt with over-pathologizing normal reactions that we have. And this is a long-standing problem that we've experienced. So, I feel hopeful that we have more professionals that are like us that can speak to our patients and help to, I don't want to say normalize their experiences, but not over pathologize. Folks are coming in saying things like, I feel like I'm going crazy. And it's like, no, you're not. This is what, this is how people respond to being traumatized and repeatedly traumatized. And I think that has been helpful.
Oh, one of the articles that came out last week was that mental health professionals, while not considered essential workers, we've had an uptick in we were already busy. If you don't think people are coming into therapy, that's a myth. Okay, try to get in. It's a 2-month wait. All right, and that's because the people that are in therapy realize that it's positive focus. It's about you getting well. This is about wellness. We have graduated from the sickness model that something's wrong with you versus, like the Carnegie said, we're trying to be well. You're trying to be your best self mentally. All right. And so the week of George Floyd was the first week where none of my clients were well. Even the ones that thrive and you delight, none of them were well. Why? Because of the secondary trauma. And that's what Dr. Parsons and Dr. Ball were referring to. It's in your feed. You can't go to ESPN, you can't go to Instagram, you can't go to TikTok, you can't go to Facebook without constantly being inundated with secondary trauma. When you're watching someone losing their life and you're helpless to fix it, and it's in your face, and then you see Ahmaud Arbery, and then that clicks off Trayvon Martin, and that clicks off everything that we've seen, Walter Scott, you can insert the names. And when we're seeing that over and over, and then Breonna Taylor, and this keeps coming, you feel like you've been traumatized because you're watching this happen to people you identify with. So the first thing, like Dr. Parsons says, you have to unplug. That doesn't mean that you're not woke. That means that you're trying to be well. Otherwise, you're like in Chicago watching people get shot every week, and you wonder what's happening with our kids. So you have to unplug from the media. And I told a lot of parents, cut it off. Take your kids' phones, give them a social media break, because everything, my daughter told me about George Floyd. I was like, what happened? Because it was in her TikTok. All right, that's number one. Two, if you can, you need to change the scenery. We went down to Florida. Shout out to the Henderson Hotel, because it's Black owned. I'm gonna shout that out. Henderson Resort down in Destin. We needed to change the scenery. I know, but I also think about COVID. Lord have mercy, it's so stressful. All right. We had to look at it and say, all right, if we just get our own space, all right, we have our own beach, and we have our own social distancing, and we eat outside at restaurants or at the resort, we should be fine. All right. And everyone needed that. Everyone needed to, first of all, get out the house, a change of scenery to just relax and just look at a beach and look at nature. One of the things we know about research is that if you want to change your mind, change what your mind sees. So if you're looking at a beach and you're looking at calm, then you're going to feel calm just by being a follower. All right. So a lot of people, if you can do it, and that's the part that's stressful. How do I take a vacation in Florida when COVID's going up? How do I take a vacation in Miami when COVID's going up? But if I don't leave, everyone's on top of each other. So I think that's that. And last thing is I think it's good to get perspective. I don't know about Dr. Ball and Dr. Gay and Dr. Parsons, the biggest issue I have is actually with parents saying, let your kids go outside. COVID's not in the oxygen. The police are not going to shoot your child living in an upper class neighborhood. They go outside and shoot basketball. And so I have kids that are just arguing like, mom has gone too far. Dad has gone too far. I can't even go to football practice. And football practice started June 15th. And they won't let me go in the school. And the coach is saying you're not going to start. So I think it's good for people to get out, get their bearings, so that they can see reality with their own eyes while looking at the news. Because if you watch the news cycle, it gives you the perception that we're being hunted every day, all the time. Now, I'm not saying that we're not. God forbid we get pulled over by law enforcement tonight. All of us are shaking in our boots, no matter what neighborhood we're in. But when we generalize, and this is what I've had to help clients with, that you think if your kid goes outside and shoots basketball that a cop is going to come up and shoot him, that's causing anxiety disorder. That is causing a generalized anxiety disorder. That is causing social anxiety disorder. So talk to your kids, keep it in perspective, but allow them to also see with their eyes and be able to get a sense that the world in general is safe. And that's a tough conversation to have.
Yeah, I want to kind of point out, I'll say the difference between being resilient and being stoic. And what has happened historically within our community for very good reasons, because, as noted, the practice of medicine has not been friendly to Black folks throughout history. And so we have very good reason to be at least a bit leery of health practitioners, kind of at least in the mainstream. And so one of the things that it has caused, particularly when we talk about mental health, is this stigma that it's not okay to go out and seek help. And you do tend to see this a bit more, as as the generations get a little older. You tend to see it a bit more than you do in the kids these days. But there is kind of the thought that's very common within our families that having needs related to your mental health is a sign of a spiritual weakness. It's something that the family doesn't talk about. It's something that you can't really address. And if you are having trouble coping, that it's a sign that you are weak. And I want to kind of draw attention to that because it is still a problem in our community. I will say it's much less of a problem. When I look at teenagers today, and I'm just coming off of a year of Jack and Jill, where the theme was mental health. And so, I had workshops with kids talking about seeing their therapist, what medication they were on for their ADHD in front of a group of 40, 50 kids at a time. So, it's certainly not what it used to be, but I do want to make sure that we are okay, and we are saying you have permission to go and get good professional help. Therapist it's different from your buddies. It's different from your spouse. It's different from your pastor. You have a professional perspective, somebody who is a neutral party who will be supportive when you need that support, but they're also going to give you that read when your behavior needs to be checked as well. And that's not always something that you get from those other venues. They have their unique place in kind of the social structure and your circle of support, but so does a professional therapist. And so I do want to encourage folks that if you are having difficulty with either the isolation that is brought on by COVID, or with the repeated secondary trauma of having to watch all these videos going through your feed all the time, or anything else that you do feel comfortable coming in and saying, this is hard, I need help.
And one thing I'd like to add is that educating patients on the use of, their sick leave. Mental health, issues, mental health discomfort, falls under sick leave. And it's amazing how many patients come in and they have passed their breaking point maybe 2 weeks ago. And it's like, I can write you a doctor's note. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah. Just like, you have a sinus infection and you don't feel well, if you are, messing up at work because you can't concentrate or, dealing with the stresses of trying to educate your children, trying to make sure that they're not too far behind for the upcoming school year, it's okay. We can take a couple of days off. We can take, a week or two off. A lot of individuals have short-term disability that they haven't even utilized. And so part of our role is to educate our patients and educate, the community that there are these, services available to them.
And so we have about 10 minutes left, and I definitely want to encourage those that are still with us, if you have any questions that you may want us to be able to answer over the last few minutes, definitely submit them to the chat box. But, these were perfect segues to that last point I really wanted to kind of be able to bring up, is that this new virtual space for us as practitioners, I consider myself a little bit of a traditionalist. I love the in-person one-on-one. I love to be able to read the body language, the nonverbal communication, so I can get the entire picture of the issue, right? But now over the last 4 months, not only myself, but also my clients have gradually gotten comfortable with the virtual setting. So, I really want to be able to use this last few minutes to really encourage those that are listening. The benefits of therapy, going and getting a behavioral health assessment to really kind of see exactly where you're at mentally, emotionally. Couples, it's a really good time to get some couples counseling and see if you can some of those loose ends, and make sure that we have a really good, the inside, as Dr. Tartt was saying, is when it's getting squeezed out, you're getting good substance out of that. So I wanted to be able to give everyone an opportunity to express the importance of pursuing therapy in terms of helping out their mental health and the wellness of their families.
I definitely feel I could be an advocate. I don't see why anyone would not get counseling. All right. Of course, I'm biased. All right. But one, you have confidentiality. All right. We can't talk to anybody about what you say. We can't talk about what you, now, of course, if you say you want to hurt yourself or hurt someone, of course, we can call and keep you safe. But other than that, it's confidential. So you don't have to worry about what we're going to say. All right. Two, you have someone focusing on your goals, your treatment goals, your growth goals, 100% for 45 minutes, 50 minutes to an hour, however the session is structured, are focusing on building your marriage. An unbiased professional helping you to have a better marriage so that you don't go home and have cats and dogs. That's a luxury. Three, it's a no judgment zone. All right, that's different from maybe going in. That's why I got into the ministry, to bring psychology into it. It's different from a pastor. No one's going to say, okay, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that. Trust me, Dr. Gay, Dr. Ball, and Dr. Parsons, we heard everything. It's nothing you can say to shock us. We heard everything. Okay, I can talk to pastors that have all kinds of lifestyles. Okay, whatever works for you guys. But it's a no judgment zone. And then we hold you accountable to your wellness. And then it's growth focus. It's really about goals. It's not about saying what's wrong with you or even a diagnosis model. Yeah, we do diagnosis, adjustment disorder, there's marital conflict, partner relational conflict, stuff like that. But the goal of this is for your relationship to grow. The goal of this is to, and I'll be brief, but the goal of this is to say you lost your job. You get to be able to come in and say, you know what, I don't know what I do. I've been doing this for 20 years. Help me think through and get out of this thinking and figure out how I go into entrepreneurship from corporate America. You get someone to actually help you think through that, that's unbiased. That's a luxury. You get to be able to talk about all of a sudden now your wife is the breadwinner, and that's disrupted how you feel as the alpha male in the house because you lost your job or your brick and mortar is not, no one's going. And now she's the breadwinner? You think that's not conflictual? And you actually have someone to help you through that that's not in your business, all right? You actually be able to help your kids figure out what's the right balance between being woke and protesting and remembering that COVID-19 is still out here. I mean, I can't tell how many sessions I did where they were like, you're hypocritical, you marched, but I can't go protest because of COVID. All right. So you have someone that's a third party to actually help the kid and the mom and dad be heard, and you can walk out more on the same page. That's what real therapy is. And I think that's why we're doing this, so that you can see real people that have real personalities, and we work for you. We work for, and unfortunately y'all get to rate us, so we can't really say all that we want to say, but you know, we work for you. We work for you and helping you to achieve your goals. So that's why I'm a component, along with my, colleagues, that everyone can benefit for counseling. I have a rule with my wife. We argue about something 3 times, we go to counseling, because I don't have time for that. Let's just go ahead and get it resolved.
Dr. Ball, I was going to say, maybe you can speak from the perspective of those that are isolated a little bit. So maybe from the perspective of singles, we talked about like couples and families, but maybe kind of responding from the perspective of singles as well.
Well, just to agree with Dr. Tartt, I think that, therapy is absolutely wonderful. It's the one place that you can go to where the sole focus is on you. It's all about you for the entire session. And this is a person who is there solely to support you and get you to your goal with no ulterior motives. So, from that perspective, therapy is absolutely wonderful. I love participating in this with patients. Now, for the individuals that, are single, that are dealing with, loneliness or looking for, relationships, this is a great time for them to come in and seek therapy, because there's not much going on around anyway. So, it's not like you're getting behind in your dating, since no one's really doing it. So, I've definitely had patients come in and want to focus more on their socialization skills, game plans, even for, getting out there when things begin to lift, as well as focusing a little bit more without all of the external distractions on the barriers that have kind of gotten them in the situation that they're in, or that are preventing them from getting out. So, as I mentioned earlier, folks are really taking advantage of this opportunity to focus on themselves and do what they need to do, so that when we come out eventually of this sheltering in place and then re-sheltering in place, that they will, be better off.